Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.
Hello. We are back with another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. Really excited about today's show. It is called Identity, Fraud, and FinTech, Outsmarting Bad Actors Before They Attack. Joining me is Marianne Miller. Marianne, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Namdi. What a great way to kind of like end the summer talking about this great topic. I really think we're going to have a great chat today.
You know what I love? I love that you've been in the industry for a while. You're very passionate about this topic. So I've been really looking forward all week to this conversation on identity fraud. It's something that hits home for me, and we'll discuss why during the show. But let me do some housekeeping, and then I'll formally introduce my guest by reading her bio. We are streaming live from Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We also have a stream going from Instagram. To my Instagram people, I look that way. That's you guys. But go to our website, Tech Behind FinTech, so you can also see the guests instead of just looking at me from a side view. So on that note, let me formally introduce my guest, and let's get into today's topic. Marianne Miller is the VP, Evangelist, and Fraud Executive Advisor at Proof. Marianne is a well-respected expert in the fraud and identity space who has been quoted by BBC News, NPR, American Banker, USA Today, and others. Marianne was most recently head of fraud strategy at Vero Bank, where she led the fraud strategy process for transitioning the FinTech to a nationally chartered challenger bank. Prior to that, Marianne held directorships and executive roles at well-known organizations such as USAA, PayPal, Lloyd's Banking Group, and the other technology firms. She has also served on the U.S. Federal Reserve Secure Payments Task Force and is a current member of the Federal Reserve Scams Definition and Classification Work Group. Marianne, welcome to the show.
Hi, Namdi. Thank you. Let's talk about identity.
So, you know what? Basic question. How do you define identity fraud?
You know, that's a really good question. And I think the definition of identity fraud is changing. So we think about the basics of it. We think about someone takes my identity and uses that identity for, there's so many different use cases. Opening up a bank account, obtaining credit, even using my identity on social media when I didn't authorize it. The use cases are endless. But the way and the methods in which bad actors are using new techniques, new technology to their advantage, deep fakes, you name it, to be able to kind of erode the identity proofing landscape is really matured on the bad actor side a lot.
You know what? I can see this every time I think about identity, and I talk to different people in the fraud space, and I always bring up this story. This was in 1999, or I think it was 99. Yeah, let's say 99, right? I lost my wallet. Someone must have found it. Obviously, didn't give it back to me, and literally, and that's when I had everything in my wallet, from my driver's license to a social security card, everything. So this individual or individuals basically created a clone version of me, right? To the point where at the time, right, I never had I had a car, but I never bought a new car before. So I never saw the book of payments that they mail you. So in mail, I get these, like in Cadillac, I get a book of slips for car payments. I'm like, the hell is this? I didn't get a car. So I called the dealership up, and I'm talking to the guy. He's like, oh yeah, how's your car working out? This was your, and I was like, you sold me a car. He's like, yeah, of course you were here. I said, you didn't sell me a car. And all of a sudden it was silence. And then he was like, oh my God. And then he was like saying that God's making a whole scene of it. He was thanking God because it was his first car. And it took me years to clear everything up because I had to put a block on my credit. Anytime someone was to open up a credit card, they'll call me. I had to get all the police report. I had to constantly mail so much information, just to remove all the negative things from my credit report. So it took me quite a while to finally clear it up. That's why when we were organizing this show, I'm extremely passionate about it because I was a victim of it. And I mean, it happened a long time ago. Now everything's a lot more sophisticated than what's going on back then. But it definitely hits home for me.
Yeah, and there's nothing worse than being a victim of identity theft. And if, to your point, back in the 90s, usually the bad actors would open one or two accounts. But what we see now, Nambi, is they'll open up multiple accounts, not only, buy a car, but they're going to open up several bank accounts because they can sell those off as mules, in different fraud forms. They're going to also take that your identity, and they're going to open up whatever account they can use to monetize. They'll also use that identity information to take over the legitimate accounts of the customers. And there's so many different methods around account takeover that, we could probably have 4 podcasts, 4 discussions on that. But so an identity theft victim today is, you take your example with, one account that took you years to clear up. Victims today have to clear up what I call national identity theft, where they really have, multiple accounts. And what's interesting, I'll tell you what's interesting. In the US, we have the concept of a credit bureau. And certainly if a bad actor opens up an account under your name, generally consumers that get an inquiry from the bureau, or they'll, you'll see the trade line open. You might even get mistakenly a card in the mail, or like you did, you got the book of payments in the mail. And then you might ask a question, why do I have this? But in the US, we don't have the concept of a FinTech bureau. And if someone opens up a FinTech account under my name and uses it to launder money, or they use it for check fraud, or they use it for ACH fraud, consumers don't know. And they might know if they get the debit card in the mail, but often they don't. And there's nowhere for that consumer to understand if their identity has been used for something very, negative.
So, no, a few things, right? In my situation, I got notified about the car with the book of payments, but every couple of months there'll be a new store credit card. There'll be some new open line, to the point that's why I had to put a stop on it. So anytime, like I said, even me, right? Any new credit, I would have to get a phone call and to approve it. So even back then, it wasn't. They didn't have the resources like they have now, like with the fintechs. But in terms of store credit cards and just anything with credit, they were just opening it up. So it took a while. I want to ask a question. So you mentioned with today's bad actors, they'll open up multiple accounts and use it as a mule. Can you explain that concept?
Yeah. So if I have an account, and usually it's some type of financial services account, like a checking account or a DDA, that account can be used to receive the proceeds of scams, for example. To cash out, it can be used for depositing a worthless check and trying to obtain the funds from that worthless check. It can be used to transfer money from one bad account to another. There's endless ways that account can be used, and it can be sold. you can go down on, the chat groups on Telegram and sell that account to another bad actor. So I've created it and now it's worth money, and now I can sell access to that account to another bad actor. And that's common. That's very common, unfortunately. So, I always advise when I'm, talking to new fintechs when they're opening up, especially when they're new and they're new to the market and they're new, that that actors, you have a target on your back from the beginning. And it's really good to make sure that you're looking at your control environment from the standpoint of, a lot of fintechs assume, well, we're fine. We're just small. We're not going to onboard that many new customers right away, and we're going to do some experimentation. But actually, the fraudsters are usually the first ones there. And so, you have to really think about that when you're thinking through what's my strategy.
That's a good point. I was having a conversation about this topic, right? You're a new fintech. Your goal is usually, right, you want to get more users, and you're hungry for more users, right? So in that quest to get more users so you can show your metrics and everything like that, you may lighten up on the control. You may think that they're valid users. What's your advice that fintechs can do in that scenario to protect themselves?
Yeah, so I call it what goes wrong when you don't get identity right. So really the fundamentals matter. And when you look at, the number of applications that you have, and you look at your control environment, you need to make sure that you have controls that answer two questions. And one of those questions is the data that's being either provided or validated? Because sometimes you can have automated systems that actually provide the data, and then the customer or the user can attest to that, and they can approve it. Or the consumer or the user will provide their data, but you need to answer another and make sure that data is correct. Make sure that is Marianne or Nambi's name, social, date of birth, address. Make sure that is correct. But you also have to answer the question: is Marianne presenting that information in the flow? The information's available. We have, Marianne and Nambi, our information's out there in data breaches. It's there for the taking. It's no longer, I would say secure. You don't have to steal our driver's licenses anymore. It's out there. And so we really need to modernize or fortify, whatever word you want to use, of answering that first question. And, is that Marianne on the other end of that interaction? And that's critical in today's environment, not only for financial services, but if you think about it, there's so many different other kinds of products out there that are available digitally. You can use products digitally to get someone to take care of your pet, or take care of your child, or take care of your elderly grandparent. Or you can, go on social media and you can sell something, or you can go onto dating apps. There's, so many. I call it the kind of the trust framework. When you think about it, how do you build trust? And I think that's more important than the number of users that you have. It's to make sure that the users that you are onboarding are who they say they are. And then otherwise, you will see what goes wrong when you don't get identity right. You'll see the money laundering. You'll start to see the selling off of accounts. You'll start to see things that you don't want on your platform.
I like the idea of building trust, right? Because if a person, you have the basics, but do you recommend that, right? And looking at the person from a holistic standpoint, or that they're signing up, trying to gauge other accounts online that they have to get this complete picture of the individual.
Yeah, and when you build that trust, then you spend your efforts as a fintech or any kind of business servicing good customers, not servicing bad actors. And I can tell you, servicing bad actors is not fun because they're going to be calling in saying, why don't you release that hold on my account? Or, they'll really be looking, they're questioning, and their line of engagement with you is not going to be friendly. Whereas when you're servicing a good customer, then you can offer them more, you can help them and give them special attention. So when that conflicts, when you don't build that trust from the beginning, you end up not understanding who your customer really is.
And that's really interesting, because I've never thought about it like that, right? If you're servicing bad actors and they're literally tying up your support line, literally, like they're like the worst customer ever, and they're tying up your support line because they want more access, they want more privileges, and that's their incentive. And your support staff now is being overwhelmed servicing them. That's a whole other twist that, from a FinTech perspective, you don't think about that cost.
That's right. That's right. And not only the cost, but it's exhausting for your team, to, having to have these conversations with bad actors all day. And while you can't keep every bad actor out, you can certainly minimize it to the point where it's not as disruptive to your business.
You mentioned before that a bad actor can set these things up and then sell it. What's the average price that they sell accounts for on a dark web or different forums?
So it depends. It depends on if it's a lending account. It depends on, if it's a DDA. So I'll give you an example, Nambi. If you're FinTech and you have your policies around check holds, or your policies around available limits or available overdraft, or whatever products you offer in the background are, I would say, generous or lenient from the beginning, those accounts will sell for more because the bad actors will look and say, what can I monetize? How can I bust out the quickest with this account? Otherwise, if you're a little stricter, of course, you can create what I call sleeper accounts, patient fraudsters. They'll onboard and they'll wait till other facilities are offered to them, and then they'll bust out. You'll see that. And that can happen through identity theft or first-party fraud either. But if you don't have good identity controls, then those things commingle. And so you want to be able to really look at, the price of those accounts can go up and up depending on your policies. And the bad actors figure that out. Yeah.
And you mentioned identity theft versus first-party fraud. What's first-party fraud?
So first-party fraud I call it premeditated credit abuse. is the way I like it.
Wait, that's a bar. Wait, premeditated credit abuse?
Yeah.
I've never heard that before. Okay.
Yeah. So you're a bad actor and you think, okay, how can I obtain credit and then just bust out? Just abuse the credit. Now, I've seen bad actors that are really patient. They'll get a bank account and I've seen these sleeper accounts even last up to a couple of years, and they wait till they're extended a car loan and a personal loan, and where they churn money in and out of the account, making themselves look like good customers, and then bust out. But that's when Marianne is who she says she is. She passes all the identity checks. And, if you're checking to see, is Marianne presenting her own information in the flow? And yes, that is. So that's her on the platform. But then she abuses her, she has a criminal intent from the beginning.
Well, why would, this is something I have to understand. That's easily traceable back to the real person. Why would they get caught?
And that's why, when I talk to banks or FinTechs and they say, oh, I have a first-party fraud problem, I kind of have them pause and talk to me a little bit more about that, because then I back into, well, what are your identity controls that give you confidence that that's a first-party fraud problem? Because to your point, Nambi, if I use my own identity, I can't scale that very well. And, and if I'm a bad actor, I don't want them to know I'm doing that, Now, there are people that are, maybe not quite thinking through that all the way, or really care about the implications later. But most bad actors that are skilled that we're dealing with and this day and age, want to operate under another person's identity for sure. So then what I often find is in these conversations is that actually they start to question whether they really do have a true first party fraud problem at the scale that they think they have, because maybe it's really their identity controls that need improved.
You've your background, you've seen a lot in this industry. Can you give me a timeline on identity theft, and the way it evolved over the years? I talked to you about my experience back in the late 90s. Can we just walk through a timeline to where we're currently at?
Yeah, if you think about it over the course of my career, I watched so many. It's been so exciting to watch just financial services change. It went from, I watched when payments started to become digital. I watched the advent of the internet, quote unquote. I watched the advent of mobile come, when we think about mobile, if you leave the house now, if you forget your phone, do you go back and get it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like a for our identity right now. It's always with us. And then now you and I are living live too, watching the advent of, I'll call it accelerated AI. AI's in the fraud world. AI's always been around. I worked for a company out of San Diego called HNC Software. And HNC, I left banking. That's when I made my transition into technology. And HNC developed a product called Falcon, which was a neural net that looked for credit card fraud. So it was scoring the probability of fraud on credit card transactions. And that was the late 90s. So we were in the risk world, we were, using AI. So it was early examples of it, more elementary examples of AI. Today it's so advanced. But you and I are kind of watching another trend that's really taking off now, that's going to affect identity 100%. And so when you think about these trends and these different ways of logging in, different ways of interacting, different ways of different ways of commerce, where e-commerce took off, then that creates, you always have to forget what you know and then start over again, because it'll be net new risks, net new ways of attacks, net new ways that risk professionals have to think through it. So I think our field is really ideally set to get ready for the AI generation, because we know through the years how to forget what we know and have to think new, which is really makes the career exciting.
You know what though? It's interesting. It's an interesting point, right? But I've seen cases now that they're saying, back to social engineering and a phone call now where, everyone's doing things, get this email, phishing emails, but just a basic phone call. And that's taking it back to, before technology, right? Before a lot of advancements on digital platforms. Like, for instance, I keep getting a phone call from Google, right? I see it pops up on my phone. It says Google. I ignore it. They call again, very persistent. Ignore it again. Call again. This is net new. This is happening, right? So I say, you know what? Let's play the game, right? I'm in cybersecurity. Let's play the game. I pick up the phone. This is the Google security team, and we feel that your account's being compromised. We're going to need you to do blah blah blah. And I'm like, yeah, let me see an email. All right, we're sending you an email now. I don't have it. I didn't get it. No, we sent it, but before that though, I don't answer questions. Let me see an email, right? Then I'm going to hang up now. Then based on the email and the domain, I'll verify and then I'll call you back. Well, no, click. It's just like
Yeah, click on this link we're going to send you. Yeah.
I'm not clicking on any links, but but I can see how, in talking to the individual that called me, if I didn't have the background I have, extremely convincing, extremely. No, the voice, the guy sounded like a help desk guy from here, right? Everything was on point in terms of the persistence, the patience of a customer service person. Didn't raise his voice. I was a little bit more amped up than he was. Very calm, total professional, right? And I was, dude, this guy's good. Because I was more so doing it. I just wanted to understand. I wanted to just see how far this is going to go. Yeah. And I didn't, but after a while, I'm like, but it was sounding so true.
So true. And now you have voice cloning, and you have voice cloning, and on top of the voice cloning, to sound like a relative or to sound like someone from your bank, they know something about you. So they're going to reach out and pretend they're a relative and they're in distress, and they're going to, in that relative's voice, they will have already cloned. And you're going to believe that voicemail because you're really going to think it's your brother, your sister, your mother that's in distress and they need money. Or you're going to be an owner of a business and you're going to get a call from your banker, and they're going to clone your banker's voice, and they're going to know something about who you pay and about an invoice, and you're really going to think that's a true interaction when it's all fraud. It's all fraud. And so and when we think about convergences of AI, convergence of fraud and cybersecurity, convergence of all of these technology methods, we as business owners, we as consumers, we as users, we as citizens, we all have to think differently about how, I call it waiting for the second beat, not to react to a phone call, a message. Make sure you verify. I had a mentor, you and I were talking before the podcast. I've been to 36 different countries. I lived in London actually for 10 years and in Amsterdam for a year. But I had a mentor from the Foreign Office from the UK when I lived in the UK, and she had this concept she taught me as a business person to wait for the second beat, not to react right away, not to overreact, and to take a step back. And I found that concept works not only well for business, but as well for reacting to when we get a phone call in a general sense of our lives, and not to overreact right away, not to assume anything, and verify. And that really helps a lot.
I like that. Wait for the second beat. I like that. I like that a lot. What do you recommend in situations like that? What can people do to protect themselves? They might not have a cybersecurity or fraud background, but they're getting these calls. They can be someone's, senior citizen getting this call. What? Because in my head, right, I'm like, all right, cool. You're calling from this company, right? Great. Let me see an email. I'm not clicking on links. And then let me get a verifiable phone number that's on the back of my credit card, that's on a legitimate website. Let me call that number and let me see what's really going on, right? What do you recommend a person should do?
So today, I recommend, especially with your family, that you have, I call like a secret word, code word that only you and your family members know. And, and if they pick up the phone and it's something urgent, they should be able to tell you that particular code word. That can help in some cases, especially if, there's really an interaction where you really want to know if it's an incoming call to you. I recommend, to your point, to not react to that call coming in, but pick up the phone and call your known trusted number, to your mom, to your sister, to your brother, and verify, and don't react or act at all until you've had a very extensive and clear indication that you've had a good understanding that their request is legitimate. And generally, think about your own family's behavior. There are not too many times their family member is going to call and say, I need something to happen quick and urgently. They might say, I need something, but next week is okay. But so that's really important, especially for family members. Now, what I think is an interesting conversation, we're talking, about identity and AI, and we talk about agentic AI. I don't know, if everyone in your audience will know that term or what it means. But when you have this AI agent going shopping for you, and what happens if you have this, let's call it a robot for lack of another term, going out and buying new Brooks shoes or Nike shoes for you, and then they go to they're directed to a fake website, and all it is capturing your details for payment. So there's so many questions that are coming up around what you can do to protect yourself, but how are these robots that are acting on your behalf going to do, and how are they in the future going to protect you as well?
The point that you mentioned, for those that don't know, I'm going to give a high level summary. Marianne, feel free to jump in, correct me where I'm wrong. We all know large language models and like ChatGPT. Everyone's been using that. Now, agentic AI is taking things to the next level, in which you have a bot that's created that acts on your behalf. So it's interacting with ChatGPT or any LLM, right? But it's taken it to the next level where it can perform actions, right? So the way that, as Marianne mentioned, you log on to something to order something, it can do that. And essentially, it's running these autonomous actions and also making decisions, because it's going back and forth with the large language model to get an understanding as you would, and then taking actions without your necessary input. So that's the whole concept of agentic AI. Sounds good?
Yeah, it sounds really good, Nambi. And can you think, if you stop and think about it, how identity really matters there? Did I kick off that agentic session? Did I really ask for those shoes to be purchased? These are going to be really important questions, and we're not too far away from that today. In fact, I think Amazon even has a buy me button now that kind of goes and looks for you. Yeah.
The cybersecurity professional in me, I want to see controls. I wouldn't feel comfortable with it acting on my behalf for certain things. Like, it would have to be a real control. I'd like to understand how authentication works. Yeah, so different things, because here's the deal, right? This is something I always say. Because I started in QA and then moved to different aspects of technology, ended up in cybersecurity, but it's been a long, multi-decade career. And QA, in my roles in QA and cyber, it's more of operational, right? Mm-hmm. So listen, you take all the controls off, we build this thing and we ship it, we get live. Everybody loves that, right? So it's like, because we're going live. From a QA perspective, you're like, whoa, split the brakes, let's test this stuff, right? And so it's not saying we're going to fix all the necessary bugs. That's what releases are for, but we have to fix something critical. Security, same aspect. Whoa, what are the controls around here? Let's try to shift left and put different security mechanisms within the software development lifecycle, so we don't have to wait to the end to add this stuff in. And when we start talking about like the new technologies coming out and so forth, my mind automatically goes there, right? Like, what are the controls that we're putting in place? What different threats? How are we doing? How are we threat modeling early on? let's think about this stuff. Let's kind of think this stuff through, or they're going to come back and bite us. And it's always more expensive to add these things in or bolt it on once we're live.
And Amby, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think when I go into a FinTech or I'm talking to a FinTech, I think my favorite people in the FinTech are, of course, the fraud team.
Of course.
But the QA team. I always want to know. In fact, I even ask, I say, does anyone in the organization have the title QA at all? And sometimes you'll even find the function doesn't even exist. So you want to make sure that QA function exists, and what are they assigned to? What do they do in their function? And then the data scientists. And I think those are my favorite people, because I think if you have good science in your organization, good decisions, good models, and then you have those are checked, whether it's your code, whether it's your scores, whether it's your decisions, that QA function is critical. Like you said, to releases, to quick fixes, to not launching before you're ready, to understand, even threats. That QA function is critical. And then your fraud teams, across the board, whatever channel your customers interacting with, what are the right controls. So these are the teams and the people, individuals within a FinTech that I always seek out.
Oh, I love it. And I've worked in pretty much over the course of my career, all aspects of that whole software development lifecycle, and looking at it from shipping things out quick, and looking at it from putting controls in place. So you don't realize how important those functions are until you're dealing with a disaster. And 1 in the morning trying to fix something, thinking like, why wasn't this caught? Why didn't anybody think about this? Like, why are we first seeing this this issue right in production? Like, why didn't we prepare? And the thing that hurts the most in that scenario is when you realize that basic testing could have caught that issue. That was exposed, and a bad actor or someone is taking full advantage of that vulnerability.
Yeah. And when you think about that, triaging those events, whether it's a fraud event or whether it's like you said, a software release event, in the future, we're really, I was on a panel recently, and I was asked, what do I see the biggest threat with AI? And my biggest point is talent. We talk about AI taking jobs, but actually we need people who understand AI within our organizations. I tell every fraud team, hire someone that understands AI and put them on your fraud team now. And that's great. There needs to be someone in the data science team, but they need to sit on the fraud team so that because you can't even go to the point to understand how to triage a particular situation to make sure that you restore your customer experience, restore your fraud controls, restore your code, unless you really understand AI.
Because one of the things now I'm seeing and actively working on is how to put controls around our machine learning projects, right? Like, because at the end of the day, everybody talks about AI, but it's all leveraging data, to your point, data science. So the data is the gold mine. The data is the gold mine for the organization, because they're going to now fully leverage it and take it to the next level with putting some models around that and using it for their customers or their services. But it's also the gold mine for the bad actors, because they want that data. So anytime you're looking at that, it was a famous bank robber, and they said, so why do you rob banks? He said, because that's where the money's at.
Yeah. it's interesting that you mentioned the cybersecurity. I was reading a Gartner report, and they did a survey around highly mature organizations when it came to AI. And the two biggest concerns that they had was cybersecurity came up number one, not surprising, but data availability. And if you think about it, AI, it's all about the data. Data. And so what's interesting is, maybe we're going to see some of these AI, and like you said, we've historically been working with these, machine learning environments, but the data is going to be even more important in the future, to make these things work.
I ask a big favor of you. Can you shoot me that Gartner report on LinkedIn? DM that to me. So I'd love to take a look at that.
Yeah, it's a great report, and I thought it was, I like the way they, framed it and formatted it, but I thought it was really, really interesting.
No, that's wonderful. Hey, question: do you see fraud in terms of, from your perspective, more of a science or an art?
Oh yeah, I like this. This is a great question. Both.
Right.
Yeah, I would say so. Going back to the 90s and neural networks and machine learning models, fraud's been using science, a lot longer than a lot of other functions. So pattern recognition, understanding that separating. Profiling, payments, understanding what a good payment looks like and what a potential fraud payment looks like. That's science is, we've been lucky that science has been part of our routines, even, decades ago. But when we talk about the art of fraud, we really have to look at, you think about, I think I call, not to get cliche, but the palette with even within, say, a small FinTech, but large banks or any kind of financial services, where you have to look at the palette of where your controls need to be. And whether that's identity, authentication, transaction monitoring, you have to think differently about your call center. You have to, and what kind of controls they need. Each channel has its own individual life, if you want to think about it, and the customer experience, you layer that on top of it. You think of all the colors that have to go into the art of fraud. That it becomes a field that you really need to think, have a real passion for problem solving, a real passion for thinking about different ways that technology works, different ways that consumers or citizens interact, and even if you think about it from a public sector standpoint or a private sector, it's definitely an art.
No, I love that. I love that because, one of the reasons I remember being in undergrad and looking at majors, right at the time, I was going to say go deeper into computer science, and the reason why I chose it when I was doing in these programming classes and so forth, I love the idea or the concept that we can be in the same class and we can complete the project successfully, but we can choose different ways to get there. I always hated the idea there's only one way to do something and that's it. Because I feel it takes away from the creativity. And I've always found myself to be thought of myself as a creative person. I'm just not like a musician or anything like that. But still, I want to use that creativity in science. That's why I asked the question, right? And like the art perspective. And I think when people think about our field, whether it's the various aspects of technology, always it's real, it's no creativity, it's black or white, it's binaries, on or off, right? And I always felt there's a creative aspect to it. So I loved how you mentioned the palette. We have a comment from one of our audience,
Mhm.
but it's not like it's a friend of mine that I trained jujitsu with, and I tell him, please go on techbehindfintech.com so everyone can see your comment, but he refuses to. So anyway, I'll read it from Instagram. Agentic AI sounds interesting. Knowing that customers are using it, does that add any complexity in identifying bad actors?
It adds it, well, back to the palette. That's a great question, and absolutely, the thinking you put into developing agentic AI and enabling agentic AI needs to go into the same thinking and the creativity and the art and science of fraud, of how you actually understand what you need to protect that agentic flow. So, what are the different types of attacks that could come from that, that agentic flow? What do I need to do from an identity standpoint? What do I need to do, from a transaction monitoring standpoint? Well, what do I need to do? Also, not only thinking about catching the fraud or detecting the fraud, but making sure that my customer experience is protected in that. We don't want to say, oh yeah, we've got this great agentic flow, but because we put these fraud controls in, you can never use it. You want to make sure that, those fraud controls really, identity processes, those authentication processes allow for quick, accurate, I would say high confidence, high accuracy rates, but also allow those flows to occur.
Because it sounds like you're describing threat modeling.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And I love that you said that, you brought that point up, because that, I think, that's the art. Right there, what you said is the art. It's like, how do I insert these fraud controls or cyber security controls, but maintain the customer experience? That's the art, and that is so hard, because at the end of the day, right, I can make it extremely difficult for anyone to sign up, right? But I can be 80% sure that it's a real person. But I'm not going to have users because they're like, this sucks. Like I'm spending way too much time. How much more verification do you need after I've done 20 different things to verify that I'm me? So that part, I think, is extremely challenging for organizations to get that right.
Yeah, and I think what you're going to see is, especially on the identity side, you're going to start to see what I call identity tokens or keys that are portable, and you can move them around from experience to experience, so that you don't have to re-identify yourself every time that you go into an agentic experience in the marketplace, or whether you are logging into a FinTech. As identity controls become more sophisticated, I think that's what will help complement the customer experience. It's a complex topic, around identity keys, but I think I really am excited about it.
Well, maybe that could be another episode. I'll bring you back on, because now when we have conversations like this, Marianne, I consider you a friend of the show. So different things may come up in the industry, and I may go, look, let's get your opinion, and we can do a whole show around it. I know we're almost at time, but before we leave, I want to get your thoughts on biometrics.
Yeah. So when you think about like behavioral biometrics, there's different types of biometrics. So we found in the industry it's very effective for risk detection. It's it's also it's helpful for identity validation. If you think about biometric from the standpoint, we use it every day to log in. We use our biometrics to make it an easier login experience, but that in and of itself is only one layer. There's other layers behind that make sure that event is safe. I think, there's a lot of consumers or users that might have privacy concerns, so I would say that when we look at probably, the topic of identity, privacy preserving is probably a topic that consumers really want, especially when it comes to biometrics. So that, I like the topic. I like the technology a lot. I think it depends on how you deploy it is really important.
it's interesting. I wanna read a stat. They say identity theft losses hit 12.5 billion in 2024 in the
Mm.
US, up 25% year over year. Another thing, fraud in financial services grew 21% from 2024 to 2025, with 1 in 20 verification attempts flagged as fraudulent.
Mm.
Some other stats: 60% of banks and fintechs reported more fraud in 2024. 31% of organizations reported fraud losses exceeding 1 million. Synthetic identity fraud now accounts for about 30% of all identity fraud cases. What's synthetic identity fraud?
So synthetic is when a bad actor, generally, and I'll use a US example in case we have a global audience here. In the US, we use our social security number for bank account creation, FinTech account creation, lending account creation. And that's when a bad actor, they either mismanage their credit. So they're using maybe some of their own identity mixed with, someone else's social security number to apply for credit, or they take your social security number and make a completely fabricated person that doesn't even exist, but they're using your social security number. So, those are the basic two types of synthetics that you'll see out there. And it's, depending on the use case, it's very prevalent in auto lending. It's hugely prevalent in personal loan applications. Synthetics they're not going away. And in fact, I think that AI will be used for synthetic creation. Would really be a situation where we really need to strengthen our controls there.
Amazing. Listen, I totally enjoyed this conversation. So what we do at the end of the show is I'm going to give you the stage to talk about people can find you. But before we do that, final thoughts on our conversation.
Well, I think that identity not only matters to the business, but it matters to us as citizens and consumers. So I think this is, a topic that can be very personal, to your point, your story at the beginning. And I think that if you have an organization or a fintech and you're really looking at how can I do good, and how can I have a better and more trustworthy platform? How can I make sure that my products work for my customers? That identity needs to be at the heart of that. And getting that right. And there's new ways to form those conclusions and have high assurance levels around identity. And I would just encourage everyone to go out there and start to look for those.
We have a LinkedIn user comment. Wow, actionable stuff here from Marianne. This is great. Thanks for hosting it, Ambi. LinkedIn user, I don't know your name, but thank you for watching. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's see if we have any more comments. Okay, we have a comment on Instagram regarding off topic. You get that sometimes, so I'm not gonna bring that. Listen, it's been a really, really good show. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. Your knowledge and expertise is greatly appreciated. And so forth. So you're definitely a friend of the show. When other topics come up, I like to circle back. I love to circle back. And this is a message for my team. This whole identity token, right? I like to drill into the technology, right, and really understand it because I think it sounds interesting. So that could be a potential future show topic for us and so forth.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, but on that note, I'm going to get off the stage so people can learn how to find you and what you're working on in your company. And I like what you're doing at Noble, by the way. Maybe you can touch on that. And I'll leave and come back.
Okay, great. So you can reach me at mmiller@prove.com. I would love to talk to anyone about how to make their identity solutions and their identity stack much more intelligent and much more customer friendly. That will be www.prove.com is where you can find information about Prove. We have blogs, we have events. We'd love to host you and see you at those events. I also belong to a nonprofit. I'm on the board at the Noble. The Noble is a cause that we're really out there to help people who are victims of human trafficking and other types of human crime. And we'd love for you to participate in the Noble. And that is something that I'm very passionate about, and look forward to any information that you would like on the Noble. I'm happy to present that and provide that too. But it's been really great spending time with everyone today, and look forward to spending time with Nambi again on Tech Behind the FinTech. Thank you.
Okay, boom, little technical glitch. Hey, thank you so much for that. As you were talking, I was putting the URLs on your screen. They're also in the comments, so they'll be there forever. Once the show's going to be posted on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook, so they're all part of the episode. Marianne, thank you. I always say back to my guests, to my audience, thank you very much for viewing. Really appreciate you, whether you're watching the show live today, tomorrow, next year. Appreciate your viewership. Appreciate the comments. Even if it wasn't on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, it was on Instagram, I definitely appreciate the comments. So thank you to everyone who commented. And a few things. We have a free newsletter at the Tech Behind FinTech. It comes out every single week. It gives you the ability to keep your fingers on the pulse of FinTech. I'll put it on the screen so you can subscribe. For my podcast listeners who are just listening, it is on techbehindfintech.com/subscribe. Definitely subscribe to our newsletter. You'll get insights on global FinTech news, also our upcoming guests, and so forth. And it's free, so it's no excuse not to. And on that note, to everyone, this show is also sponsored by Sweating Equity. It's a show that we're coming out with. So here's the deal, right? Tech Behind FinTech, we're talking about a topic and we're going in. Sweating Equity, we will be actually talking about the guests and their journey, but here's the twist. They'll be in a gym working out with me, and we're gonna have a lot of fun. We may even get into some jiu-jitsu. It'll be cool while interviewing them. So we get the interview while they're under some sort of pressure. So it's gonna be a fun series. This show is sponsored by Sweating Equity. Marianne, thank you once again. Really enjoyed meeting you and talking to you. Look forward to future conversations with you.
Maybe next time we'll be in the gym when we do it.
So we shot the pilot episode already, but it's not been released. We're actively looking for leaders in the space in FinTech and also outside of FinTech. So if you're open for it, definitely we shoot in the South Jersey area. I don't know how close you are to it, but that's something we can definitely work out. All good.
Okay, let's try it. Sounds fun.
You have a great. Oh wait, here's somebody else saying, thanks, Marianne and Anandi. Thank you for watching. Also, another comment from Instagram. Thank you both. I'll send my comments elsewhere. That's funny. And on that note, you have a great weekend, and thanks again. Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.